Welcome. Welcome to the deep, dark depths of the Caribbean of Cuba or Cuba. I'm your host, Shalom Mandeville. To the inhabitants of the underwater world, the appearance of a man-fish must be akin to man encountering aliens from another world. A non-threatening posture, however, is soon rewarded with acceptance by most aquatic life. This earned trust is supremely satisfying to the diver and provides him with a unique adventure in nature. And I'm very proud to present to you today's guest, our man-fish, Gilbert Van Rijkenwarsal. He's a very noted underwater photographer in Nova Scotia, and he has won several awards, and a lot of his work has been published in the National Geographic, the International Wildlife Magazine, Natural History, Equinox, Canadian Geographical Magazine, Outdoor Canada, the Atlantic Salmon Journal, and Trout Unlimited. Last year, his services were acquired by the Institute of Tourism in Havana, Cuba, and he did very fascinating underwater photography there. And even though the rest of the show is kind of tourist-oriented kind of thing, there is a lesson to be learned that we will not have such clear underwater if we had pollution.
That's very true.
Take it away, Gilbert.
Thank you very much, Shalom. I'm very pleased to be again invited to your show. As your introduction says, it is a very fascinating experience for a diver to come into the underwater environment and observe the creatures that live there and appreciate the fact that you're able to do that. We call it an adventure, and it is an adventure in nature. And I'm bringing you some images that we took last year on the Caribbean side of Cuba, first in some of the coral reefs, and then later on in a cave phenomenon that we will go into. Here we have one of my Cuban guides that the Cubans were inviting us there, and they were keen to show us some of the beauty that they have in their aquatic environment, and they want to inspire people from elsewhere to come and visit the Cuban waters. And I think it's very worthwhile to go there because the Cuban underwater world is hardly touched, and I think that in itself is a qualification for many places in other parts of the Caribbean have been touched by diving tourism these days in such large numbers that many of the species that are there are not so visible anymore because they are simply scared of the large number of divers that bother them, you know. So in Cuba you have these conditions that are still quite close to wild conditions, and that's why I have been going to Cuba 4 years, 4 years not in a row, spread over the last 8 years. As I was mentioning, the thrill of meeting these beautiful creatures of the reef is an adventure in itself, because you are there and you see the other diver there. These creatures, once they realize that you are not a threat to them, they become trusting, and they are actually, in this case, rather curious in me, as I was probably only a few feet away from them taking these pictures. And they were just going about their business of foraging around in the reef, looking for each other's reassurance also to be that close. And they were sort of mimicking the fact that they were going about their normal business, but at the same time they were very curious in my presence. They were sort of circling around me, and so we spent a great quarter of an hour in that location watching these marvelous creatures, which this is a particular example of. They are one of 3 angelfish species that are about that size. You have the queen and the French angelfish. They are creatures that when you are in their own environment, you become part of that environment in a way that you are an intruder, they get used to you, and they are showing a behavior which relates to their territorial site. They're interested in you. They try to figure out what you're doing there, and so on. That was a little parrotfish that you saw there. One of the various species of the parrotfish. They are splendid, also very colorful fish that you meet in the coral reefs there. Beside the yes.
How far is it from the coastline? This
was probably half an hour offshore, with where the Cubans brought us, but it's not necessarily depending on the distance from the coastline. It can be very shallow water also. The depth in this case was probably about 20 feet.
Is it close to the big cities, or?
Close to the big city, I wouldn't say so. As soon as you come close to the bigger cities, the water conditions are becoming polluted. So you have to be away from the harbors, and then in Cuba you find similar conditions like here in Nova Scotia. You know, the water clears up and the environment is clean, and so on. Now, here we have just arrived on the site near Bay of Pigs. There's this one road which follows the coastline of Bay of Pigs, and the particular location has a lot of sandstone formation, which in the far distant past was subjected to volcanic action and earth tremors and so on, which resulted in cracks in the surface there, cracks that went down several hundred feet and are miles in length. And they go through the country, through this wilderness area there, and in some cases, as we are here, they are very close to we are very close to the sea, the Caribbean, and salt water washes into these caves from underneath, and so there is a saltwater connection. And now on the surface, it's still fresh water, but fresh water, especially when it's warm, has a lighter specific weight than the much laden, mineral-laden salt water that is below it. And so the first 2 meters or less is fresh water, and when you swim in there and you come into that area where salt and fresh water come together, you can mix that, and then you get a blurry vision. And you will see that at a certain moment. We were here. This location is where one of these cracks has resulted in a larger sort of open section, where you have a deep hole that goes 250 feet deep into the earth, and from it are various crack connections. And our guide was the president of the Cuban Diving Federation, Mr. Nieto, and he had lived in that area for several years, and his particular interest was the exploration of caves. And so that needs a particular meticulous planning and skill of cave diving, And now this cave doesn't need that particular skill, because I had never done anything like that in my life before. I stay away usually from taking chances that are unnecessary, you know. But in this case, he assured us that there was absolutely no problem, and so we've just entered the water here of this opening, which probably was about 100 feet in length and 70 feet wide. And then from there, you have these openings, smaller and larger, in different levels of the hole. And in the upper levels, plant life, algae and so on, is visible. Also, you get the freshwater plant life, and then you get plant life that dwells in brackish water, and then you come into the dark zone of the cave where nothing really grows, and you get only creatures that live there that attract fish, and so you get the reef fish that live in this cave. And it was rather interesting to be inland surrounded by jungle and see the tropical coral reef fish swimming in a few feet depth in this cenote. That's what they call it in Mexico, but in the Yucatan Peninsula you have similar type of karst phenomena, they call that. Anyway, we had a look at various entrances, and then the plan was to go through a crack on the surface which was only a few feet wide, and then goes down into an irregular shape, and then it opens slightly up into a wider and wider cave phenomenon, and then it reaches a bottom. And in this case, that was about 250 feet below. So we had to swim along this, and we are here right in this crack. The surface is fresh water, and then below that you have the salt water, and sometimes you see this blurriness which happens when the two kinds of water mix. But we were following this to a spot where Mr. Nieto had discovered a chimney, as they call it, which was an entry away from the large opening that you saw before, through which we would enter the cave below at a depth, to a depth of about 30 meters or 90 feet, and then from there we would swim back to the opening. And he had explained us some of the things that we were going to see there, like, for example, stalagmites and stalactites, which were the result of its formation during probably the ice ages, when the water levels of the sea were much lower for that period of time, because there was so much ice. And these stalagmites and stalactites formed up in these particular locations, and they are now underwater, quite deep, and sometimes, you know, until people realized that that was the cause of it, they wondered how that could happen. But anyway, we were there in a calcium type of rock, which could have been the Jurassic period, in which you had sediment from ocean forming up and filling up with also the skeleton of diatoms, of planktonic creatures, and all kinds of creatures like shells and whatever creatures left a skeleton behind that fossilized later into this material. And so we were reaching at a certain moment, as soon as we came deeper into the cave, and we were shining around with our flashlights, we were in extremely clear water. The water was so clear you could shine 200 feet down with strong bundled light that we had. It was not always possible to photograph that. I was using a video camera, which is very, very low sensitivity of about 4 lux. You know, that's about a low. Photographically, you can't capture that, but the video camera can. And so it was interesting to take the video camera there and record some of the experiences of and the feeling of going into a place like that. You know, it's rather awesome to go into the earth through a chimney and wonder what you've never done that before. You wonder what you're doing and whether you are crazy or whether. But our friend assured us there was no problem at all. And this is Bob Semple slowly descending into this chimney, and then of course there is some sediment that comes from the surface, falls in and holds onto, but it's very, very fine material, and but it didn't bother us too much. I guess it settles down into this totally, well, not entirely totally stagnant water, but so stagnant that any sediment settles down on the bottom, you know. And if divers have been through a particular location many times, like in this case, then there isn't too much sediment left in that location, so nothing to worry. In other cave situations, that is one of the dangers, because when you go in a cave and you don't realize that behind you all the sediment is coming down because of the bubbles that are loosening it, then you might, when you turn around, you face a wall of mud with absolutely no visibility left, and then how to find your way back, you see. So in that case they would have markers, and you'll see some of those markers in this cavern as we were moving on. And you can actually see in the far distance this aquamarine light spot there. That is actually the far distant. It's about 150 meters opening, the underside opening of the large sort of chimney that reaches the surface. That was the cenote that we entered in, and then over the surface we swam through that small crack on the surface, and at a certain moment now, when we are inside, we are looking from inside up, and we see the lights of the cracks as here and there it enters into the cave, you know. But here in this case, you see those are the lights that entering from that crack on the surface. You see the bubbles rising up, and that indicates that we are looking up, because that's where the bubbles go. So here we have one of those stalactites formations here. And there's a lot of white material that you see in the rocks. Much of that are fossil deposits in the stone. One of the Cuban guides that assisted us there, you'll see him at a certain moment searching in some of the crevices in that wall, and then he actually finds he finds a shell of a shellfish, something like an oyster shell of that period, and of a particular type which doesn't exist anymore. And our guide from the Cuban Diving Federation, the president, Mr. Nieto, he is a biologist, and he interested himself for this, and he explained later to us what it was and so on. And but that's the type of thing that you have to be interested in, additional to just the thrill of diving a cave, you know.
How come I don't see that much life there?
Well, there's not too much nutrients or plant life or reason for creatures to be there. There is some creatures that come in there, and they usually go up to the sun area, which is let's say in the first 20, 30 feet from the surface down, and then below that it dramatically drops off. There is hardly anything down there. Our friend Mr. Nieto told me that he would always see a pair of large angelfish that you saw before, large ones, that made the cave into their home. We didn't see them, but we saw lots of little parrotfish and other species that were up in the light zone.
That's why you need light for plankton and
They would eat little fish and planktonic creatures, small crabs, that sort of thing, you know. And their presence, if there are lots of those fish, then there is lots for them, lots obviously to eat. But only one pair finds the space very unchallenged by others. And if they have the whole space for themselves, they will find what they need, you know. But here you see, we found this shell there, that fossilized shell, and Bob Sample put it in his pocket there. He was allowed to do that because there is just enough of those fossils over there. He took it with him as a memento. And so you see this sort of eerie, beautiful turquoise water below there, which is the wall of the hole that we entered it on the top. And we went into that direction. We reached bottom there, which was about 35 feet. And then we slowly ascended, and then we did a little decompression for the safety, but the whole thing didn't take us longer than probably half an hour. But it was a magnificent experience, the only cave dive that I've ever done. It was a memorable one. So we reached this rock pinnacle that is sticking downwards, and there were some holes in that, and the divers were fascinated with it because when divers swim underneath it, and the air is trapped in the holes, and they look like silvery spots that you can see here and there and on the underside. So then we continued, and there were all kinds of remnants from the surface, from the jungle that had sunken down there, including man's things that he throws away, in this case a cigar holder. And of course a Cuban diver is quite aware of cigars and will demonstrate almost naturally how that is done. So here we're coming up to the surface again, and the sunlight is so strong that it burns out the top of the picture a little bit. But so I swam in the front of everybody. I went up first, and then I filmed them as they were coming up from the deep. And you can see here how clear that water was, and the visibility was 150, 200 feet, just like that, and it was just unbelievable. From here, we explored different other corners of this cenote, and we actually entered one a little bit, but it was not a really accessible one, and you don't want to take any chances. So we just had a look around, and we had our thrill, and just to look over such an interesting natural phenomenon is quite an incredible thing to do. So I called it an adventure. That's what it was for us. And people who are well, I would say trained divers or certified divers with a little experience can do this cave dive at Playa Giron, it's called, without any problem, and experience something like that. And it's very worthwhile. Cuba has a lot of very outstanding diving experiences in store for people who like to do that sport. So we are looking into one of the corners there, and Bob Sample is in there taking pictures of the companion divers, and we are looking at fossils and fish that are fleeing from the big creatures that we are in their environment. They are just usually small fish. And here we are in one of the channels where rocks had fallen in and so on, and light was coming in. It was kind of dramatic, and it gives the atmosphere of caves when you have a light on. And of course, here's natural light coming in. And so the Cuban divers had gone a little bit further, and here you see already how the sediment comes loose a little bit. That's the thing to watch out for, and that's why cave diving is not for everyone, you know.
As you know, Bob Simple has been on this show many times before.
Yes, so I hear. Yeah, Bob is works with the Department of Fisheries and does a lot of diving for his profession, taking samples and so on. And we share our interest in the underwater world on Nova Scotian waters, and we are both members of the Nova Scotia Photographic Guild, where we have a lot of fun with our photography. And we want to share, as photographers, what we see with other people. That's the basic thing of photography.
Do we have any caverns around here?
There are caves around here, but not as far as I know in the salt water. I know caves on land, but not in the water. In Nova Scotia, there could be that I am not aware of, but not as far as I know. Here our dive leader is checking our dive time and giving us a few minutes of decompression time, so that the gases that can cause divers disease are leaving the blood, and this was just mostly a security thing. It wasn't really necessary, but one does it anyway, just for the sake of...
Well, I guess we are running out of time, and you have been watching Gilbert van Rijkewarsal, who came to this country in 1967 from Holland as a brewmaster, but ended up as a underwater photographer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shalom.